Today on the show, Colby asks for specific feedback on career hacking. Ming D calls in to ask whether or not it's possible to get a raise as a pharmacist. Danny wants to know where are the best 5 cities. We discuss Toastmasters, and Sasha calls in with a question about finding a side hustle. Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is your Friday Roundup.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, today on this episode, I hope we can dive a little bit deeper into the art of career hacking and salary negotiation. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I'm doing quite well. What's going on in your world?
I would say the one thing that came to mind is I am doing some decluttering, which has kind of been a constant theme in my life over the last year. But this is kind of interesting because I'm actually thinking about getting rid of some of my workout equipment. And in particular, I'm thinking about letting go of the dumbbells. So I had found some on Craigslist a while back. They have some space in my, gym setup that I use, but I've kind of found a new program that is working so well for me that I don't think I really need the dumbbells anymore. And that is strong lifts. And I was put onto this by Tom, who's become my workout partner over the last several weeks. But basically, you have 2 workouts. You have a workout A and a workout B, and they just alternate, and you work out 3 days a week. On workout A, you do squats, bench press, and deadlifts, and then for workout B, you do squats, overhead press, and rows. And every single week, I'm lifting the most I have ever lifted. And then there's actually a mechanism for once you reach failure, which at some point you will reach failure, right? It has a mechanism in there to help you go back and tackle that and work through it. And it is probably the hardest I've ever pushed myself, and I'm constantly in an uncomfortable place. And because I'm doing it with a workout partner who's carefully watching my form, I feel like I'm at a very low risk of getting injured while doing this. So I don't think I can recall a time in recent memory where I've enjoyed working out and essentially leaning into discomfort as much as I am right now. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, Jonathan. So I definitely want to talk about strong lifts because that sounds fantastic. But actually, I want to start with the decluttering because that was the first thing that piqued my interest here, let's say. So what does your gym setup look like now? I think for most people, they're trying to visualize what you have. You talked about these dumbbells that you bought, but talk us through real quick how you outfitted your gym and what it looks like.
Yeah, so over the last several years, I've accumulated a pretty impressive collection of gym equipment. I have a treadmill and a stationary bike, both purchased used on Craigslist, which are, I have a confession, rarely used. And I have a pretty decent set of dumbbells, which were the ones that I was just mentioning. I have a squat rack, I have a bench press, and then I got a barbell and a set of plates. And yeah, I've just kind of been acquiring stuff that I kind of thought would get me in shape. Increasingly, I've realized that it's not how much stuff you have, it's how much you use it and how much you're willing to push yourself. Shocking epiphany, right? And as I look at the 80-20 on this stuff, the stuff that's moving me forward is the squat rack, the bench press, and the barbell set and plates. And that's a small fraction of the actual footprint of my gym equipment. So I'm thinking about decluttering. What can I get rid of? What do I actually need that's moving me forward?
Yeah, that sounds right. And when you were saying, I have a confession that I haven't used my treadmill, I'm thinking like, who the heck cares? Steady state cardio to me seems like a 1980s type thought process. Strength training is really what's important. And you get such a great heart rate workout, if you will. Like if that's what your goal is, you can have a whole lot more fun in a very short period of time than just mindlessly running on a treadmill. So yeah, I don't think that's something you need to make a confession about at all. I think that's a smart choice. And yeah, that is very similar to CrossFit. It's these weightlifting movements with barbells, and we throw in some rowing, some shorter running or sprints in some cases. And yeah, I mean, like you said, pull-ups, but really you can outfit a gym and do really, really well for yourself for just a couple $100. Like you said, you can probably spend 200 to 300 on a nice squat rack that's pretty inexpensive, a barbell set like the one you got, or if you wanted to get like an Olympic barbell set with maybe some bumper plates, it might be a couple $100 more, but that gives you a little more flexibility. But you can pretty much do anything you want for maybe $500 all in. That's not too shabby. And then you don't need that gym membership. And also, like you said, you have this workout buddy with Tom. You guys are now getting together a couple times a week, right?
That community aspect is critical. If I think about what CrossFit does, so I actually went to your CrossFit gym just to test it out. And I think it was Bring a Friend to CrossFit Day, which is awesome. And I had a fantastic time. But I thought about it. Somehow I was working harder than I have ever worked on my own. It wasn't that they gave me some sort of magical pill or drink that made me super motivated. Rather, it was just this community aspect. And I love that. I suddenly understood the value of why people are willing to spend what can be incredible amounts of money to maintain these CrossFit memberships. But if it drives results, that's incredible. But the other half of that is, if I can't motivate myself, if I am incapable of motivating myself by myself, is there a way to work around that? And if you get a good workout partner, someone that can drive you and you drive them, you can bypass that lack of motivation by yourself and still get somewhat similar results. And this is kind of what I'm seeing right now is I'm working harder than I've ever worked in the gym. I'm getting results that I haven't seen in close to 6 or 7 years. And I'm having a good time doing it. Like, I want to show up and I want to put good effort in. And as you kind of work through some of the check boxes, right, that we talked about with the check boxes of hobbies, it's a really cool way to get results, to get mastery, right? And also some community as well.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And for me, having that community and having those people there to push me, that's why I go to CrossFit. I have the equipment at home and I do use it, but I don't work as hard when I'm by myself. And maybe that's some type of issue with myself mentally or whatever it is, but you just work harder when you're there and everybody is working their butt off and everybody's sweating and struggling, but they just keep on going. And it was funny, yeah, when you came to the Bring a Friend Day, it was amazing. I don't know if you remember, but that third circuit, you literally ran past, you had like a weight vest on and you ran past one of the fittest guys in our entire gym. And I'm like, oh my God, Jonathan's going to have a heart attack. I've never seen someone put out that kind of max effort on the third circuit when you still have one or two more.
There's a little bit of a lack of strategy going on there.
Oh man, that was great though. But it's incredible how it really does help. And I'm glad you found a good partner there with Tom. That's very cool.
All right, well, let's go ahead and take a few minutes and talk about this past week's episode with Jay from Millennial Boss. There's so much buried in this storyline, and I took tons of notes as I was kind of prepping for this conversation. And where I wanted to start, and this is kind of almost her origin story. She says she didn't do college really well, but one thing that really stood out to me is looking at college from an ROI perspective. That is not a phrase that me and you have used, although clearly we're thinking that way, but that is something that I want to focus on. College, you need to look at it from ROI. That's what's been missing from the conversation up to this point. If you can clearly point to a path that has you going into debt $50,000 to get this college degree, but you are going to make hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars over the career that you're going to be working, I get it. And it totally makes sense. It's not a bad decision. There's a clear ROI there. It becomes a little bit cloudy when you talk about the individual that potentially is only going to have a 10-year working career. You still have to look at the ROI on college. And it's not to say don't go to college. It's just that, 6 figures of student loan debt, if it takes you 5 years of working to pay it off and you're only working for another 5, that ROI becomes a lot more muddled. And so I just love the frame that she put that in.
Yeah, it's a tough issue because clearly you don't want to go for 4 years and spend all this money and come out with nothing. That's worst case scenario. But I know a lot of people don't have their plans made up at 17 or 18. I mean, hopefully in a not too distant future, millions of people will be listening to Choose FI in high school and they'll have that in the front of their minds. But realistically, a lot of people don't. So it's hard to say, like, are there only certain majors that you think are worthwhile? Like, I'd be curious between me and you, just a conversation about this. How do you see that? Like, for your own son, 17 years from now? Are there majors that you'd say, oh, wow, don't waste your time on that? And I'm not asking you, of course, to say, oh, that major is worthless. And clearly there are many people who go to college in majors that they might not be able to get a job right away, but it's still worthwhile. But have you thought through what you would think has ROI and what doesn't?
Yeah, I have. And the problem is if I say any of them on the show, we're going to get emails all week back from people in those professions that say, wait a second, you can absolutely do this and pursue FI at the same time. So I'm going to try and have this conversation without throwing any particular profession like under the bus. So I'm going to talk about this in the context of my son. To our audience listening to this, I realize that your situation and what you think is important for your children may be different, but just for my son, I'm looking at myself and I'm realizing that I spent a insane amount of time in school just so you have all of high school, you finish high school, you have your 4 years of college, and then I did a doctorate. So I have 4 years of that. And then I had 4 years to pay off my student loans. And then I found out, you know what? I don't really want to do any of that anymore. I want to do something else. Okay. That is a ton of time committed to schooling and education, a lot of which was focused to something that I'm not using. So I'm already thinking about the talent stack. I think that the talent stack is a great replacement for very focused linear education that drives you to one outcome that you may or may not be happy with. So that's going to be kind of a guiding principle for his education from the groundwork. The biggest thing is I will be looking at trends. So right now, we know that one of the biggest job openings in the world is programming, is coding. There is a 900,000 position job gap here in the United States. All of these jobs pay well over the median income. I think they start at around $50,000 a year, and you can make all the way up to a couple $100,000 a year. But a lot of people land in that kind of $90,000 range. That's if you're not in the high paying epicenters, like San Francisco, California, that area. But that's a very, very good income. And if you combine that with geo arbitrage, living in a low cost of living area, living in the Midwest, that's in the now, and that's over the next 5 years. So, if my son were 13 years old or 14 years old, I would be looking at, is this something that excites him? This idea of building a talent stack, does that interest him? I'd be probably pushing him to that. There's a couple additional things. You don't need a doctorate to become a programmer. You don't need a master's degree for a programmer. So already we've chopped off 4 years. We've chopped off an additional 2 years. You can even make the case with Treehouse that you don't even need a bachelor's degree, which is insane. But for those of you who say, oh, you really should get it. Okay, that's fine. You can get it. It may be helpful, but clearly it's been demonstrated that it is not absolutely necessary. There are people that have figured something out that are doing it without it. So looking at this kind of 10-year path to FI, getting above a median income, if coding fits the box and the trends line up where that is still a good choice, then potentially you have someone that is either pursuing their bachelor's degree and is doing half of it while they're in high school and then getting their last 2 years and then somehow leveraging that and getting a job in this industry. Or maybe they go completely rogue. They kind of follow the mindset that we talked about in this past episode where it's all about what have you built. They have that talent stack build up from a young age. They do a code school at the age of 18. They have the job at the age of 18. They're making the above median income. They're saving 50% of their savings rate while their peers are going out and taking out the debt to go to their undergrad. They are either living with their parents from 18 to 20, or they have kind of figured out a roommate situation. They're house hacking, and basically they have this game beat by the time they're 28 years old. That's just, if I knew then what I know now, in the very focused context of what are the trends saying in 2018, programming is a massive trend that has huge appeal for me.
Yeah, and I like that focus on trends. And of course, you're just talking about programming, but there could be 100 different trends. There might be something different 2 years from now that we'll focus our time and energy on. So it's not about programming per se. It's about just looking at what's going on in society and trying to figure out how you can benefit from that knowledge in the short to medium term. That's probably my big takeaway. And yeah, there were lots of things that Jay talked about that I was just fascinated by. And since we're talking about college, she said she had the whole package. She had grades. She went to a great school. She was a college athlete. She had internships. But yet, when she came out and she applied for these high prestige jobs, it was basically like crickets. Nothing happened. She didn't get any jobs at all. A quote that she said was, "I'm not going to wait around for something to happen to me and get lucky. I'm going to take action." And I thought that was just a really, really impressive thing that a lot of people would say, oh, poor me, right? Woe is me, and sit there and drink their Starbucks and go into debt. That would be that, right? You'd have a whole gaggle of people sitting around complaining and just kind of doing the minimum, which is sending your same dopey resume in to another couple hundred companies. And what are you going to get? You're going to get the same results. If it didn't work the first couple hundred times, it's probably not going to work the next couple hundred times. So she went that extra step. She created a blog about study abroad. And that opened doors because this student travel company got in touch with her and eventually hired her. While she said she was a joiner previously, that was the word she used, she'd never created anything before, but now she had this blog. And then she started that gifted and talented program for third graders in her area. Who really does that? She remembered back to when she was in elementary school and how much she loved that program. And she decided to just make one on her own. Nobody gave her permission to do that. She just stood up and took action. Another quote was, I became someone who creates things and not just someone who joins things other people created. So it's this thought process. She had hit that rock bottom point after graduating from college and doing all the right things. It was 22 years of doing what she thought was exactly what was expected of her to get a successful life. And there she was. She was declined for a $5 rum and coke at a bar in Boston. I mean, that is rock bottom. Right?
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I don't even know like what mentally what's going through your mind when that happens, but that has to be a low point for sure. And she said, I became the person I wanted to be, but didn't know how. And Brad, this to me was massively mind exploding, right? I mean, that is what so many people are thinking. They're like, I know I'm not happy with my current state of affairs. I know that I want a brighter future for myself and for my kids, but I don't know how to get there. And I think that for her, you know, she was able to find this answer. But for the people that are listening to this now, who may feel that exact same way, it's by listening to episodes like this. You know, it's by listening to someone that has been able to model a behavior that's coming from a similar place to you, but got a different result than what you're getting because they made maybe a harder choice, a more inconvenient choice, a different or unorthodox choice. Once you see that taking a step back is not always a bad thing, you're like, wow, she is where she is. But she had to go from making $40,000 down to like $30,000, you know, down to like $9 an hour. There were all these things that in a vacuum, they look hard. They look painful. They don't look like linear progress. But when you stack it up to the final result and you see that this is just what it looked like for her, it's encouraging and it's empowering and it can send you to a wildly different place. She said, sometimes I imagine that my 21-year-old self is seeing me now and saying, high five, nice job. I think that the bigger point here is that life changes. You know, if you look at where you are in this world right now, you got to realize that that is a snapshot in time and you can do anything. You can be anyone that you want to be 5 years from now. But if you don't make any changes, if you don't do anything differently than you're doing right now, then your course is already set. Are you willing to make a change? Take one action, one single piece of action, implement it in your life, and then stack that with additional actions to find new information that can inform you, enlighten, and inspire you, and then implement that day after day. That is absolutely the key to this thing.
Yeah, and you talk about taking action and not being worried about doing something different. She said, don't be afraid of looking weird, I think was her exact quote. You can't wait around. You can't just do the normal thing. You have to create the opportunity for yourself. A perfect example is she scrapped her entire resume. She spent 20 plus years of her life building this perfect resume with the internships and the college sports and the great GPA and all this stuff. And she threw it out. That was her whole life. But that was really getting her nowhere to move forward in life. So she didn't sit there and cry about it. She didn't say, oh, I went to a great college and I wasted my time. No, she saw the facts on the ground as they were that day and decided to move forward with the talents and skills she had picked up because she took action. She now put on her resume this startup that she worked for and her own blog on student travel. That then helped her get this job with the Olympic Committee for digital media, right? Not for what she went to school for, not for liberal arts, not for poli-sci, whatever, right? It was for digital media because that is the world that she was now inhabiting. And As she said, Sheryl Sandberg said, look at this career as a jungle gym instead of a straight ladder. Sometimes you're going left, right. Sometimes you're going right back down to get back up to where you ultimately want to be. And if that meant, in Jay's case, taking a $9 per hour job at the Olympic Training Center, then so be it.
And there's two other key points that we have to spend just a couple minutes talking about. One is that she said, you know what, if you're scared to do it by yourself, it's okay to start with a partner as a crutch. And I wanted to pause on that, Brad, because I realized looking back that I leaned on you as a crutch, right? I mean, if you look back at me, I had this idea and I was like, I could go do it. And I want to even reframe it. It's not just a crutch. There's something powerful there. If it takes getting a partner for you to be willing to move from being a consumer to a creator, go get a flipping partner and do it.
Yeah, you're right. And this is what we were talking about, even just with the weightlifting. Sometimes you just need that support. Crutch has such negative connotations, obviously. Like, that's not what you're talking about. That's not what she's talking about. It's find someone that can help motivate you. Find someone that has complementary skills. We're a great team. But individually, could we have made Choose FI into what it is today?
No.
I really don't think so.
No
right?
way, dude. No way. They would have just called me the Lost in Enthusiasm show. And we got to talk about what have you built, man. I mean, this is the biggest thing. You can't gloss over this. This is the opportunity for the people that are listening to this show that are trying to figure out what it looks like for their kids to take it to the next level, for them to take it to the next level. There is absolutely power for you to become a side hustler, to become a blogger, to become a creator, to take on a small project and just have something that you put your passion and enthusiasm into. Even if it never takes off, it doesn't change the world. No one ever reads it except for your mom. There's value to having done it. It is a resume patter at bare minimum. But I want to actually go back and have a second generation FI conversation because I think that this is even more remarkable. If there are a ton of adults in their 30s and 40s that are thinking, man, I wish that I had the courage to go start a blog or a website or a business, there are so many fewer kids that are doing this in their teens, in their maybe 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Anna, there's not very many Annas that have been able to convince their dads to help them start a website. But for the ones that have, the ones that have broken through that resistance and gotten started, they write their own ticket to life. That's what became clear to me. And they do not have to achieve high levels of success in that they are getting picked up by the New York Times or Wall Street Journal. Just the fact that they have done it, they now get to say, what is the story you tell yourself about yourself? And as soon as you can figure that out, as soon as you can write that down and explain it and verbalize it, every single door that you can imagine opens up to you, whether it be jobs, scholarships, and basically just communication skills, generally speaking. The entire world opens up to creators.
Yeah, and you just know this intuitively. People are impressed by others who take initiative, right? And don't do the normal thing. Sometimes that means wild success. Sometimes it means a failure per se, maybe a learning lesson, whatever you want to call it. But man, if I saw someone come in and try to apply for a job and they had done a couple of really cool different things that showed initiative and showed that they had ideas and they had passion and they had the ability to start something, that's a person who gets that job. So it's just, again, I don't want to beat this phrase down, but it's so important, the talent stack. It's just so important. Learn as much as you can, learn different things, experience different things. Don't just take that one standard path that everybody else takes and think that you're going to be that one in a million person that is a partner at Goldman Sachs or something. Do something different. Enjoy your life. Enjoy the journey. You just never know where it's going to take you.
To our audience, I hope that is valuable. I mean, that is absolutely the worldview that we are tackling this both for ourselves and as we raise our kids. These are the ideas that we're hoping to instill in them. All right, Brad, let's go ahead and open this up and crowdsource the remainder of the show. It's so obvious that when you're talking about this episode with Jay, you have to spend some time talking about the power of career hacking. We've said it many times, and I think it's very obvious, albeit a little bit simplistic, that we're all bound by a very simple equation. What you earn minus what you spend equals the difference, right? And you can optimize that. That's where life optimization comes in place. There's ways to get more with that difference, but it is a very simple equation. And we spend a lot of time talking about spending less because as a consumer-driven society, clearly there's room to reel it in and you can get some very quick wins by doing so. But to not talk about growing your income is frankly negligent because it's so powerful. And career hacking is a major vehicle to do that.
Yeah, Jonathan, I hear you. I think this is part of my own limiting belief, honestly, that we talk about control what you can control. To me, that always is the reflexive answer of lower your expenses. But very often you can earn more money. And I think that's what's so fascinating about this. And I'm really excited to hear what the community said about this and what they thought.
So we got a message on the Facebook group from Colby, and he says, I have just about everything I can want to do at this point in terms of getting my expenses down. My investing strategy is working and my plan is moving forward. My question is, what are you going to do to grow your career or get your income up? Now, I really resonated with the ESI Money podcast, and that was one of our earlier episodes. Brad, can you double check it? I think it's episode 23.
Yes. Very impressive.
I spent a lot of time working on those images. All right. He says, I really resonated with the ESI Money podcast episode, so episode 23, and have had some good success incorporating some of his advice. Does anyone else have any resources to learn from? I think the community may not focus on this aspect of FI enough, but there may be reasons for it. I'm just curious what additional levers you have been pulling with your career. So let's start by reading just some of the feedback, Brad, and then I want to get some additional thoughts from yours. One of the things that Jay obviously mentioned was just the fact that she was almost mercenary in her willingness and ability to change industries and to change location. We have talked about geo arbitrage kind of in passing, and it hasn't quite made it onto the pillars of FI yet. But I think that is going to change, and I think both of us have decided that there are not 10 pillars of FI, there are pillars of FI. Potentially, there are thousands of pillars of FI, and we reserve the right to expand it when something is obvious that it needs to be included. And I think geo arbitrage clearly has earned its place. We've seen it now with Jay from Millennial Boss. We've seen it with Physician on Fire, talking about how doctors can actually earn more in the Midwest. And we've seen it with this idea of domestic geo arbitrage. Freedom is groovy, leaving Long Island. Frankly, you leaving Long Island, this incredibly high cost of living place, and moving to a place where your money simply went farther.
Yeah, and I know Millionaire Educators, another one who's done the domestic and international geo arbitrage. So this is unquestionably a pillar of FI.
You got to go where the jobs are. Tying this back to career hacking, if you are in a densely populated area in your particular industry, let me talk about pharmacy for a second. So I am a pharmacist, or was a pharmacist, and I was working in Richmond. In Richmond, there are probably somewhere between 40 to 100 pharmacies serving this local 20-mile radius. So it's a supply and demand issue, but it's actually interesting because it's not as straightforward as you would think. You would think there are a lot of opportunities here. There are a lot of jobs available here. But then you got to look at the supply. And Richmond has a pharmacy school, which is churning out, again, 140 students or pharmacists a year. And on top of that, with it being a metropolitan city with, I guess, a lot of things to do, a great area to be, people want to stay here. So there are plenty of individuals that are competing for those jobs. If you go out to one of the more frontier cities, if you will, and they're not that far out, but if you drive out like an hour to a city like Fredericksburg or Louisa, maybe there's just 2 or 3 pharmacies that serve that entire area. But because the supply side, the employees, the future pharmacists, I can tell you that working for my company, they had trouble filling those spots. They were lucrative spots. In many cases, there were pharmacy manager spots that were handed out to anybody that was willing to move there. If you're willing to move, the opportunities and the promotions and the raises will come along with it. It's a powerful tool to put in your pocket, and it certainly is something to be considered as you're trying to navigate the income side of the equation.
Yeah, you're right, Jonathan. And it does come down to personal choice, though, of course. I think that's really important, especially for new listeners of this podcast. We are not dogmatic about anything. So when we say something is a quote unquote pillar of FI, that doesn't mean you have to do that to be a member of the FI community. Hardly. That is not what we're saying at all. So there are choices that you have to make, but you need to think about it. And I think a lot of people just reflexively go through life without making these hard choices, without even thinking about these hard choices. So that's what we ask, is really review this. What's holding me back from moving to a different location that's going to cost substantially less, and maybe you can earn the same or significantly more possibly. So I think that's what Jonathan's trying to get across here. And just going through this Facebook thread, Maureen said networking, volunteering for projects, working on certifications. Also, a lot of people take other skills classes like Excel, writing for professionals, or joining Toastmasters. So there are lots of ways to build this talent stack, which is yet another thing we're constantly talking about here at Choosify, is building skills for life and finding these areas where you can improve. And you just never know where you're going to be able to put together a few of these totally disparate skills and put them into one talent stack that adds up to something substantial and that maybe allows you to look at a problem a little bit differently and come up with a solution that nobody has previously. I think that is just a cool way to go through life. That's how I kind of approach life personally, is I am not a world-class expert on anything. It's just not my mentality, for better or worse, frankly. But I like to learn a decent bit about a whole lot of things. And I've found that it helps me synthesize information quicker and come up with solutions that I probably would not have been capable of even as recently as 10 years ago. So this list of attributes that Maureen talked about is huge for sure.
You know, that Toastmasters really stood out to me because it's kind of popped up several times in different areas, but it's kind of like a common theme. Now, I didn't do it, and I assume that you haven't done it as well, but let's just talk about it for a second. So Toastmasters, it's like a club type organization that focuses on public speaking and leadership skills. If you're participating in it, you're participating with other people that are also focusing on these kind of growth mindset skills. Communication is incredibly powerful. I have benefited from communication skills over the last at least 2 years minimum. It is a very, very powerful tool to have in your toolbox. If you are learning how to communicate more effectively, and at the same time, you are networking in a peer group like Toastmasters with other people that are doing the same, your network is both immediately expanded and you're kind of on an inside track with people.
Yeah, I think public speaking is a huge thing that so many of us are frankly scared of, or think we are, or have always been. So yeah, Toastmasters seems like something to get you outside of your comfort zone. And I know I've heard Lewis Howes talk about that as a key to his success on his podcast. And actually, we just got introduced to TJ from halflifetheory.com, and he talked about moving to the United States and how Toastmasters helped him significantly in so many ways. So it's interesting to hear multiple people in our general world talk about Toastmasters. So it's something to look into for sure.
Frank said, think about what skills people above you on the career ladder have that you currently lack. See if you can develop some of those through self-study or joining career-related organizations in your chosen field. If you can find a way to write about what you do for a career-related blog, newsletter, or other publication, that may help too. If you can find a way to teach in your field, that also makes you more valuable. But note that in some careers, particularly a lot of IT work, the quickest way up may be by switching jobs every few years. I mean, and going back obviously to Jay as the perfect example of this, it went from making, I think, minimum wage, or it was less than 30 grand a year, up to 100 grand a year, and then double that within several years by being willing to leverage geo arbitrage and change sectors, which that's just incredible. Timothy says, off the top of my head, here are some things that I've done to go from minimum wage machine operator to a six-figure global businessman over a span of 14 years at the same company without a degree. Work hard, do my best, give credit to my team and others even if I did everything, replaced I with we and the like in every single sentence and email I sent. I still actively correct I out of emails. Networked at work, reached out to the VP and other leaders and asked them how they got where they are and get a mentor. Join clubs and volunteer, network in the community also. Dress like the job you want. Don't dress like your peers, dress like management. I switched from shorts and t-shirts to slacks and polos, and less than 6 months later was promoted. Not kidding. When something new comes down that forces change, don't complain with everyone else. Be the first to accept the change and become a leader in rolling it out. The boss fired the person to level up from me on second shift. It was a garbage role. He was devastated. I offered to work second shift or split shift while he would look for someone else. 10 minutes later, I was promoted and moved to second shift, doubling my income. Years later, another boss had a need on the other side of the country for a new person to get hired for the level up from me. I offered to move for the promotion. He immediately kicked off the process and paid for my move and doubled my salary. Take chances. Speak up. Don't hang out and complain with the non-promoters that'll one day be working for you. Do things for your team. Organize a potluck or a team outing. Handwrite thank you cards for your team and people that do anything for you that warrants it. I can't tell you how many confused comments I've received from people over the years about how genuinely nice and unexpected it was. Never be the smartest person in the room. Surround yourself with people better and more knowledgeable than yourself and learn from them. Never stop learning. Don't know how to read a P&L? Get a P&L for Dummies book. Don't understand a finance concept? Talk to the finance person about it. People will talk to you and teach you about what they do if you show interest in it. As you climb, get more and more humble. Always remember, you are where you are because of the work other people did. It's not about you, it's about them. Brad, I have chills down my spine. I think we just need to mic drop, walk away from the episode right now. This is incredible.
Yeah, I agree. That is truly remarkable. I don't really have much that I could possibly add to this, but it just reminds me of something that Don Wettrick said in a recent episode, which was talking about people complaining, that it's so easy to complain and that you can't do things. And there's some camaraderie almost in a sick way of people who like to complain about the elusive they or, oh, that system or whatever. But as he said, it's hard to say, yes, I can do this. That's the hard part, coming up with a solution and going for it. And that's what this comment just reminded me of. So yeah, I loved it.
You know, it's funny, Brad, at a personal level, I can talk about pharmacy and you can probably talk about accounting, right? And what the pay scales look in those two different sectors and what it would look like to go to different areas. I can't speak to a lot of these other industries. I would just be Googling salaries on Glassdoor. But as it happens, we got a voicemail from Ming Di asking about getting a raise as a pharmacist, something that I feel like I'm qualified to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this up.
Hey, Jonathan. Hey, Brad. This is Ming Di. I just want to say you guys are awesome. And that it's really empowering to know that there are other people who think just like you in terms of life. Before I ramble on, I do have a question for you guys. So some of you guys who works for Walgreens know that there is an initiative to stop raises for all pharmacists. I guess my question is, in that environment, is there any way, in your opinion, to get raises? Because I am thinking about talking to my district manager about this because it's unfair for those of us who are high performing and not be compensated for our work. Please let me know your opinions. Thank you guys for all that you guys do.
Ming Di, this is a great question. It's one that I feel like I can talk about maybe a little bit more openly now that I'm actually no longer working in the profession. And it's just my thoughts. I know for a fact that we do have district managers with different pharmacies that listen to this show and can probably comment on the accuracy or the validity thereof. I'm sure I will get some feedback, but I'll give you my best. One is that it is a supply and demand issue partially. So if you're working in an area where let's say you work in a city, like I work in Richmond. Okay. So there is a pharmacy school in this city that is churning out 140 students a year. And the large percentage of them, because residency is optional in pharmacy, they would like to, in many cases, just stay in the area where they've been living for the last 4 years. And so you got to just be honest with yourself about the supply and demand aspect. Now, it's always easier to retain a good employee than to find another one, that may or may not be good. So if you are, as you stated, a high performing employee that's helping them hit their goals, that's doing stuff above and beyond, I think that in pharmacy, you should be able to at least get a raise, and you'll find out how much they want to keep you, if you're basically willing to walk away, which is why it always behooves you to have a very strong financial ground game. You will be able to get a raise even in a tight competitive environment. That raise is not going to be in pharmacy. Like the pay scales basically are somewhere in between. And I think this is an overgeneralization because you have to take into account where in the country you are. Some areas just are higher cost of living areas. Like I'm in Richmond. In Richmond, you can probably make somewhere between $90,000 to $150,000 in pharmacy. That's your kind of general pay scale. In California, that probably goes up to $180,000. In Virginia Beach, even though that's closer, I know that is probably $10,000 to $20,000 more than it is here. The other thing that I found out after being on the outside is that I worked in retail pharmacy. From one retail pharmacy to the other one across the street, there can be $10,000 to $20,000 in difference there. What I would say, one, if you're a high performing employee, your district managers are looking for staff pharmacists that are interested in growth, are interested in growing with the company, are interested in taking that next step. They're always looking for a pipeline of pharmacists that are going to at some point become managers. So that is the easiest way to get a substantial raise of probably $10,000 to $20,000 a year, right there. If you have not yet gone from staff pharmacist to pharmacist manager, you need to let your DM know that that is something that you want to work for. You got to be aware, though, when you're going from becoming a staff pharmacist to a pharmacy manager, you're not just going to go to a good situation where everything's going great. I mean, they're typically filling positions that have emptied up and something has gone wrong. So you need to be ready to be putting yourself in a more difficult situation. They're not going to pay you more for doing exactly what you're doing now. So just kind of be aware of that. The second thing is, and this is what's very interesting to me, is that pharmacists make a pretty good salary for what they do right now. I mean, it's a pretty reasonable salary. I think the trend will be over time that is going to go down. I've taken a look at some of those operating statements, and I think that in terms of controlling what you can control now, your best friend is thinking about a side hustle if you want to, and focusing on your savings rate. You know, what you love now, you may not love 10 years from now, 15 years from now. By controlling your expenses and putting as much money as you can aside to build, this perpetual money-making machine, that's going to give you so much more control if you were to take advantage of some of the things that we've talked about, like maybe going to an area where the supply and demand worked more in your favor and you needed to leave your job and find a job across the street or across the town or another city or state. Your willingness and your financial flexibility to maybe take a step back could eventually let you take 2 or 3 steps forward. But I hope that was helpful. There's also an article that came to my attention, and this was posted in our Facebook group, but it really is a great article for anybody that's looking to get a raise based on performance. And the idea is generally that at some point, if you have the courage, you're going to go to your boss and you're going to ask them for a raise. How do you do that? What strategies can you employ? What are people doing that have done it successfully? What are they actually doing? In fact, Jay in this episode talked about how she has successfully negotiated 3 out of 4 raises, right? 3 out of 4 for the win. This article that we'll link to in the show notes kind of lays out some of the basic strategies that people employ. But I think the summary, the most obvious low-hanging fruit is come up with what you plan on doing, ask them to agree and to commit to these goals that you're setting together. And then if you hit those goals, it makes it very easy to ask for a raise based on that. And if you're putting all this extra work in and you're outperforming and there's just no love coming back to you from the raise end, there's other employers and you're a high performer. So keep that in mind. Talking about geo arbitrage, we got this message from Danny, and he writes in and he wants to know if there's a list or a way to narrow down good cities to live in to best optimize FI. Let me go ahead and read this. It says, I discovered your podcast a couple months ago. The content's really great. Thank you for creating this terrific resource. On the podcast, I heard mentioned a list of cities or countries that are optimized for FI. I grew up and am currently living in a suburb of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and want to move to a warmer location. Minnesota winters leave me stressed and unproductive. My criteria for moving are warmer winters, good schools, low crime, and FI friendly. If you guys were to create a map or a criteria list or way to narrow down good cities to live near, what would that look like? Or since creating this content, where have you seen the greatest following emerge? Is it pretty spread out, or are there some clusters that you may not have expected? Do you have a good resource for finding FI cities or communities with low cost of living, safe neighborhood, and strong bikeability? All right, let's kind of tackle these piecemeal because there's a lot of good stuff here. I think this is like one of the things that we are slowly starting to aggregate. There's not like a system in place to get it, but we do start to see patterns. I guess, Brad, first, let's start with you since you made the choice to geo arbitrage from Long Island to Richmond.
Yeah, I definitely did the geo arbitrage and we moved to Richmond, and it wound up being this really kind of fortuitous accident in essence. We didn't know this was such a great place to live. We knew that the cost of living was low, and that was a significant benefit for us. And I mean, that clearly led the charge. Since we've moved here, we've realized that it's a really easy place to get around. There's no traffic. You can, even though we live in the suburbs, we can get into the heart of the city in under 20 minutes. It's usually 15 to 18 minutes to get down to the river, and there are tons of different outdoor activities. So I think that's something you want to look for is outdoor activities. They're especially free activities, right? We go hiking and walking all the time, and you can sit along the river here, which is great. There are lots of cool little districts in the city that just have neat breweries and restaurants and just a lot of things going on, frankly. It's a pretty vibrant city. The schools are great here. I think that's something to look for as well. Bikeability, I think that's one thing that I'm not personally looking for. And I don't know that it would be great out in the suburbs where I live. Maybe in the city, there are parts of the city that you could conceivably bike. So to me, Richmond is a great place to live, and we definitely have a small but growing Phi community here. Of course, we've heard Denver in all the meetups that I've been to. It seems like Colorado is a natural place for people pursuing Phi. Lots of outdoor activities. There are just tons of people. Maybe it's the mindset of people that leads them there, also leads them to Phi. I don't know what it is, but it seems like a disproportionate percentage of the community lives in Colorado. That's obviously not a huge percentage, but disproportionate as far as the population. So that's some place that jumps out to me. But I mean, I think cost of living obviously is a huge one. We talked about our time. So like commuting, you don't want to sit in a car for 45 minutes. These are the things that I would look for as I was going down my mental checklist on a place to live. I want to live close to where I'm going to work, whether that means biking or walking or even driving a car, even if it's a 5 to 10 minute drive. Well, that sure beats going on a train for an hour if you lived on Long Island or in the Connecticut suburbs or something like that, or sitting in traffic for 2 hours if you lived in LA. There are these things that you clearly want to avoid. So that's what jumps out to me. Jonathan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that list makes perfect sense. You sometimes hear about the absurd cost of home ownership. That's, to me, always at the top of the list. When you hear like a starter home is like $500,000, that's just, I mean, just starting there, and there's so many places that are beyond that at this point. It's like, oh, it's going to be tough. Not saying you can't do it. A lot of times the incomes reflect that, but it's a little tough. One thing that I do have that's interesting is that we can look at our local groups and kind of see where there's been, a lot of engagement, a lot of membership there. And I'm going to throw out a couple of the top cities that really have found a following that'll give us some interesting data. Washington, D.C., so many people in our group from Washington, D.C. And then a few of the big cities, make this list: Los Angeles, California, San Diego, California, Denver, Colorado, Dallas, Texas, San Francisco, Chicago. What's interesting, though, is that we start to see some that are actually a little bit farther south as well. So, New York, no surprise that it's a large group. Atlanta, Houston, Phoenix, and then Portland, Oregon, Philadelphia, Charlotte, North Carolina has a really active large group in Charlotte, North Carolina. Tampa, Florida, Boston, Raleigh, Salt Lake City in Utah, and St. Louis, Missouri. There are some very, very active groups in these locations. So that's just kind of interesting. It'll be, these groups are still so young as that they didn't exist, until last fall. But 5 years from now, when we're looking at this, you're going to be potentially having thousands of members in some of these groups. And how does that transform the community? I really think it'll be interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And of course, if you're looking for a Choose a Phi local group, just go to choosephi.com/local. And you can see the entire list. We're getting close to, I think, maybe 180 groups, Jonathan. I know you're adding by the day, so who knows? It could be closer to 200 at this point. But yeah, there are a lot of groups all throughout the country and all throughout the world.
There was a couple of new ones that were started this past week. One in Maui, which is interesting because I know that you're going there. There's one in Ireland and one in Northern Ireland. Brad, did you know that Northern Ireland and Ireland, they actually are on a different economic system now? Like one uses the euro and one has a different currency. And so when we were setting up the group for that region, they asked to keep it separate just because frankly, the entire structure, the entire economy is different there. So it's kind of cool to see as this goes global, people find the appeal of having this where they can optimize it for their own local circumstances. Next, we have a voicemail from Sasha calling in to let us know the impact that Phi has had on his life and following up with a question about side hustles.
Hi, guys. I've been listening to your guys' podcast for a little bit. The reason I started listening was that one day at work, a friend of mine at work was telling me about your guys' podcast. We got into the conversation about myself getting into minimalism, trying to reduce a lot of clutter in my life. We're both firemen, so I spoke to him about my recent trip that I went to British Columbia, Vancouver by myself. Did some traveling hacks, stayed at hostels, things like that. Did the entire trip, plane tickets, food, and everything for a week for less than $1,000. So I was pretty proud of that. He kind of told me to listen to your guys' podcast because I spoke to him about wanting to be retired in 10 years. I have 11 years in the fire service now. And at age 41, I want to be retired and to do something else. So he turned me on to your guys' podcast, and I'm listening to it, and I just want to say it's like changed my life. I maxed out my 457, finding other ways to make my money work for me instead of just spending it, less on consumerism, more on having products that I actually use and something that means to me as well. One of the questions I have is that we were both talking and I had started a Shopify account and a website and everything, and I wasn't really passionate about the website. And I was wondering what you guys suggest the best way to find a online side hustle or maybe an avenue to figure out what I can give to the community or to people, products that I would enjoy or they would enjoy. So great podcast. I've been listening to it nonstop. I listen to it every time I walk my dogs for about an hour. I'm sure my dogs love it. But anyways, another thing is that when I listen to you guys, one of you said that you do jiu-jitsu and CrossFit. I also do both. So anytime you're in Florida, either one of you guys, warm welcome to come train and do whatever. All right, guys. Thank you very much. And keep it burning. Thank you.
Keep the fire burning. I love that, Sasha. And great voicemail. Love that you're into the podcast and are taking action, and 10 years till retirement. That sounds phenomenal. And yeah, that was me, Brad, for the jiu-jitsu and CrossFit. So yeah, I'd like to take you up on that when I'm down in Florida next. I will be there for FinCon in Orlando this fall, but I'm not sure it'll line up, but to be continued for sure.
I love your question about starting a side hustle. I think it's one of those things that it takes a reframing of your entire worldview and mindset. If you've been listening to the show and you're caught up, you'll have heard probably 30 or 40 examples of different side hustles that people have done or tackled. And so you think that you need to have like this amazing revolutionary idea, but in reality, likely you just need to take something that has already been done, already been established, add your own unique flair onto it, and then just do it. Something that's working in another city, you could just incorporate in your city. Something that's in your city, but it's not being done well, you could just do better. Or you could create something, all totally fine. And then just depending on how much you want to put into it, you can go, there's these platforms where stuff is already set up for you. You use the third-party platform to sell your service and they get some percentage of it. You could do something as simple and easy as Uber and Lyft. You could do dog walking through a dog walking service, or you could, create classes and courses on Udemy, that sort of thing, where you're using their platform, getting access to their audience, offering them their service. You could fly a drone and do drone photography of real estate. In terms of starting your side hustle, it doesn't need to be like this revolutionary idea. It's just, what do you want to put time into, and hopefully what lights you up, because it may take a little time before you're getting an immediate return on this. I'm going to cop out though. What I'm going to do right now is say, first, if you have not yet listened to episode, I believe that's 30 of our podcast with Alan Donegan, you need to go listen to that episode because that will help you reframe everything. And then the other thing is, this is my commitment. We're actually going to bring Nick Loper on the show, who has a show called Side Hustle Nation. He has like 200 and some odd episodes. Every single episode, he interviews someone and they walk him through how they established and built their side hustle. First of all, just go listen to all 200 episodes and then you will find something that is exciting. And then just try that, do that. There's value in failing at something because it drives you forward. It shows you something that won't work, but along the way, you pick up some skill sets that you can use in your next attempt. Totally fine. But we're also going to bring him on the show. I've got an invite out to him. He's going to be coming on this fall. And we're going to hopefully get, over the past 200 episodes, what were his top takeaways? And what is something, if someone wants to start from scratch, find the idea, what should they actually do? So that's obviously an important piece of this puzzle. And I can't think of anyone better than Nick to help us unpack that. All right, well, unfortunately, that is going to bring this episode to a close. Now, as you know, we like to finish every episode by doing a drawing for a copy of a book that we have found useful. And there's 3 books that we offer. The first book is J.L. Collins' book, The Simple Path to Wealth. The second book is Dominic Cortuccio's book, Design Your Future. And the third book is Vincent Puglisi's book, Freelance to Freedom. If you want to enter the drawing, all you need to do is just go to choosify.com/iTunes, follow the instructions there, and leave us a short written review. And then send us an email to feedback@choosify.com. letting us know that you left a review and what screen name you left it under. We give away 1 book for every 5 written reviews that we get, and then we announce the winner on the Friday roundup. And Brad, how many winners do we have today?
All right, Jonathan, we have 1 winner.
And the winner is Narman. And Narman says, the best personal finance podcast around. I have been on a financial and personal development journey for the past 7 years. Today, I'm 30 years old. Happy birthday, man. I tried my luck with stocks, get-rich-quickly schemes, real estate, postgraduate studies, trying to find a way to earn a living while living a happy and meaningful life with the people I care about. These guys are amazing. I honestly feel like I'm hanging out with some buddies, sitting around the table chatting about how to get ahead in business, finance, and personal development as a whole. These guys have answered everything I've been looking for in regards to investing all the different vehicles. Spending, the valuist approach, is super important and greatly appreciated by my wife, and general wellness, eating, sleeping, productivity, life hacks to make life a little easier. You will be super happy with the time you spend to listen to these guys because they make actionable items for everything they talk about, because they know what is needed for the everyday Joe who is looking for what can I do today. And they definitely show the way to find success in all the areas. I'm super thankful that I found their podcast, actually from listening to another podcast, Bigger Pockets Money and On Fire, to take action and spread the good news. Norman, thanks so much for weighing in with that review. We greatly appreciate you listening, and we're glad you're getting benefit and value from the show. All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.